Good evening and namaskar. Welcome to a new episode of Africa Talks. Today we'll be talking about the role of African diaspora in the socio-economic rejuvenation of Africa in the post-COVID phase. With me today there are three panelists. First of all, I would like to welcome Dr. Boji Daniel, CEO of Team 54 Project. Dr. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Daniel is a trained dental surgeon and founder of a youth-based organization called Team 54 Projects, and has been passionately working on sustainability issues throughout the globe. We would love to know more about your organization, about the work you are doing during this program today, Dr. Daniel. So once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Our second panelist today is Ms. Siti Nagwali, who is joining us from Tanzania. And she's CEO of Center for Zero Violence and has been working immensely on gender issues and on child protection issues. Ms. Nagwali, thank you so much for coming in our show. And I would like to welcome you on behalf of the entire team of Indiafrica Today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Our third panelist is our friend, Mr. Iziogo Namdi, who is a promoter of PanAfricanism and co-founder of Exilient Africa. Iziogo, once again, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to an exciting discussion today on the issue of African diaspora in the post-COVID-19 reconstruction of Africa. Gentlemen and Ms. Nagwali, recently we all came to know about African diaspora and its cultural importance when a campaign went viral on social media. The campaign was by the name of Don't Go Viral. And it actually went viral, where several artists from Africa and a lot of artists who are part of African diaspora, they came together, joined hands with UNESCO to create credible information about COVID-19 on social media and to stop misinformation that was spreading in Africa. In a way, that campaign also showed the power of African diaspora, that if they can come together, they can reach out to the second largest continent on this planet, and they can actually make a difference. However, if we see the political and the economic engagement of African diaspora by various African states, we don't see that kind of excitement. We don't see that kind of systematic relationship building with diaspora. So I would like to request all of you to give your initial comments. How do you look at African diaspora and its current engagement with their home countries in Africa? I would like to start with Dr. Daniel first. Dr. Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Indiafrica Today, for having us on the platform. And we welcome all your viewers from across the world. It's a trying time for everybody in all the continents right now because of the ongoing pandemic. However, we should be quick to realize that life must still move on. That it is during hard times like this that we need to make very strong decisions or very informed decisions on how best we're going to move to as we approach the end of the century. On that note, I want to re-emphasize that the role of the Africans in diaspora, more than ever before, has been on multiple fronts. One, do remember that over 400 to 500 years ago, many Africans were brought into the continent in North Africa and in Europe by colonial masters. And the reasons for this were because they intend to build a model or a global financial hub. However, they did that infringing on the rights of people. That's one. Secondly, when modernization took place 150 years ago, or when the revolution through industry started 150 years ago precisely, another wave of post-colonial system began, where brain and smart people in Africa will have to leave their region to go and look for more knowledge, more understanding, greener pastures. In doing this, the best of the best are always extracted from the ground, and then those left behind begin to play a very destructive and unsustainable policy. So more than ever before, the role of the Africans in diaspora has been exposed again by this unseen enemy. What is my view? My perspective is this, that
Great.
for the last 50 years, many of the global leaders we have been paying lip service to developing people's basic needs, to developing and securing people's life, to fashioning how best our economical growth can have a human face, at the same time how best we can manage what we have with a good brother or sister relationship. Greed, nepotism, politics, ethnicity, bias, racism has created a concussion of distorted glass lens. So we cannot really see development as one body. But surprisingly, without any summoning of any meeting by the UN or summoning of any meeting by EU or African Union, every leader immediately understood fully well that they have not been able to provide universal healthcare coverage, which is just basic rights for everybody. They've not been able to ensure socio-economic determining factors that help elevate people's gain, that all the lip service to sustainable development goals and the Millennium Development Goals have been fully exposed. So my opening remark is this: now is the time more than ever before for us to sit down and reset the button. Let's just be our brother's keeper. Let us look at things critically. We cannot continue doing the same thing that has brought us here. It is time now for us to come together. It's time for us to throw aside our religious sentiments, political affiliation, and work to ensure the sustainable development goals, those 17 thematic points that can guide us through a more better world. Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Daniel, you're saying that it's time for introspection and time to come together to achieve those sustainable development goals. Wonderful. So let's go to Mr. Iziogo Namdi. Mr. Namdi, how do you see the growing engagement with the African diaspora vis-a-vis the Pan-African view which you generally promote? Do you think, is this the right time? Do you think the time has arrived for Pan-Africanism, for engaging with Africans who are there all over the world and develop something called a Pan-African movement?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Narendra. And good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Basically, I think Pan-Africanism has been there for a very long time. It's not just something that I've started yesterday. It's been there for a very long time. And a lot of people have sacrificed, a lot of comrades has contributed to the Pan-African, the actualization of the Pan-African Renaissance. So I think what the African diaspora has to do right now, because the COVID-19 has offered us an opportunity, is to look inward. Last year there was this campaign of the Year of Return. And just like a joke, we had a huge diaspora pool. A lot of people moved back to Africa, people who had less knowledge about Africa because of the popular media culture and representation. They had a narrative change. They had a mindset shift, There was a shift in their thoughts, and they had to return back to Africa. So if I would be very frank also, there's been the 6 states of the African Union, which is the diaspora. And in terms of organizing the diaspora, that is why ourselves, like Dr. Daniel and myself and several other colleagues, have been trying our best to see how we can come together, form a collective, and channel developmental resources, be it in human, be it in whatever form that we have access to the continent. And if you look at most of the challenges that the continent face, the diaspora, with the kind of exposure which we have, because the majority of the people reside in developed countries, this is a standard that can be emulated and, you know, transferred back to the continent for sustainability to be actualized. However, it's also important to note that we must consider the demographic when we are moving any such kind of a standard or development to the continent. We need to look at the fact that people there where you are taking this advancement need to accept it. They need to be used to it so that they can be able to sustain it. So I think this has offered us an opportunity for the African diaspora to come together. A lot of organizations have been established. One is even been headed by the former AU ambassador to the US, and various other organizations like the State of the African Diaspora. So I think this is a time that the African diaspora should rise and help us actualize the Pan-African Renaissance. Thank you.
Great. So you see it as a big opportunity for African
Indeed
diaspora
it is.
to engage with their home countries. Let's go to Siti Nagwali, who has joined us from Tanzania, and she works in the social sector. Siti, how would you look at the contribution of African diaspora till now in Africa? I think there is some audio issue there. We're not able to hear it properly. Yeah, we can't hear you. We'll come back to you again. So going ahead with the program, Dr. Daniel and Mr. Namdi, what we have seen in the last 2 decades, that most of the engagement of, yeah, I think Siti is back.
I'm sorry, I have internet problem. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much, Indian African, for having me today. I'm honored for this great opportunity so far. I'm Siti Nagwali from Tanzania, social worker by profession, gender and child protection expert. Also, I'm the founder and chief executive director of the Center for Zero Violence, an organization based in Tanzania where we are fighting against all the kind of gender-based violence and violence against children within the society. Okay, speaking of the diaspora community, despite, we all know that diaspora communities are the important agent of the social and economic development. Their contribution toward the so-called social and social and economic development cannot be ignored. This diaspora community have managed to engage and interact with the people from from the different parts of the world. Their skills, knowledges, and their skills and knowledges are very important to be utilized in African continent, all over the African continent, to bring about social and economic development. Okay.
Okay.
And yes.
Yes. You want to add something more?
Okay. Yes. Despite of the.
I think we lost her again. Let her come back. So moving ahead in the program, Dr. Daniel and Mr. Namdi, during the last 2 decades, what we have seen is that the engagement with the African diaspora is only limited to the kind of monetary remittances that African people have been, sending back to their families and relatives. Do you think there has been any change in the policies of any African nations in terms of making their engagement with African diaspora more systematic and more strategic? If you can share some examples of maybe from your own countries or any other African country where they have taken some structured, steps to make this relationship more concrete and more beneficial to both of them.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Dr. Daniel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Narendra. And thank you, Siti, for really putting it in context. That where the African diaspora really has advantage, especially now in the COVID time, is the delivery of a human resource capacity, the delivery of ideas, concept, technology that they've learned abroad back home. But Narendra has also put in context what our challenge has been, that we've not been very coordinated, and he said it clearly. Remittance has always been on an individual level. Now, when you are talking about socio-economic development, the theory around socio-economic development has three main thematic points. One, you want to have a good public policy that is coordinated. Secondly, you want to have an integrated community or societal or organizational in terms of institution, CSO, the civic society, non-governmental, and you also want to have a personal integration of all the components together. You also want to domesticate all the government policy and all these public social interactions between institutions, social organizations, parastatals with the individual. So it's not enough for you to pick only the individual point of remitting money. Money remitted must be coordinated, because one person does not make the island. The country and the community is made by diverse groups of people with varying culture, with varying knowledge. So you are right, Narendra, to highlight the fact that yes, remittance are in billions of dollars. It is even more scary when they tell us that over 22 billion just on my country alone, from my own country alone, is 7 times more than the budget of the entire country in the last 4 years, have been remitted in 1 year. And yet there is no coordinating, that's what I'm saying, public policy to coordinate how this remittance can be done. Okay, yes, we understand you need to give your people this money, but why not give them this money to set up community farmings? Why not give them this money to set up small business loan? Why not give them this community to mechanize the farming in their own place? While this percentage of money given will give you interest on this, we give you interest on that, we give you interest on. So government must have a policy where whatever remittance is given, yes, should be given to the families of, those in diaspora. However, encourage them to ensure that we have family small businesses in moving forward. So you are completely right that yes, highlighting remittance is good, but it is not if it is not coordinated to address sustainable development goals, which will mean that diaspora personnel or professionals or individuals can also plow back what they have learned. And like Eze said, use the peculiarity of the region. For instance, in my country, telling people about the polar bear will be like, you're wasting your time. But telling them that their goats and their sheep may not see the light of day because of the changing weather, because of the changing principles in agricultural practice, that the earlier they start to, adapt, the earlier they start to assimilate knowledge, but cone it down to their peculiarity, the earlier they start to accommodate new ideas, the better for sustainable development. They need to get that, but telling them big grammars, like you want to have export GDP, things they are not very related with, even things that me and you struggle to define from time to time, is now what we need to look in total. So it's good that we've highlighted a source of income, a source of channel of funding through remittance. But what is more better is collecting this money in an organized way, or even if it is directed to those families, government should ensure that the policy should be family. These monies you have, we can give you soft loans, we can give you tax rebates. All we need for you to do is invest in this kind of agriculture peculiar to this your region, and we'll be able to give you more things. Like that way, going forward.
That brings me to the next question, where I would request Izigo also to share his comments. Why there is so much, lack of a policy framework when it comes to engaging with diaspora? Because in the last 2 decades, we have seen a lot of voluntary, diaspora. A lot of young Africans are going out to study, for jobs, for the livelihoods. They're getting, they're settling abroad, and it's a voluntary, migration from African countries to improve their, lives. And I think government must have realized in last 2 decades that there's a huge potential in this diaspora. They are young, they are better skilled, they have better resources in hand, they have a better network. Then why there is a lack of a proper policy framework in African countries to engage with them? Mr. Namdi.
Yeah, well, basically the African countries, the African countries themselves, even for those who are there residing in Africa, are still suffering from this same policy issue, that it becomes very difficult to extend policy and reforms to the diaspora. But it's very, very, very important. And this also is why we always talk about leadership. Like in the previous event, I was just mentioning about an analog system of leadership as compared to what we have in the digitalized age in the 21st century. You know, so I think what Africa needs right now is to put themselves in the right path. And actualizing this is not very difficult. A lot of countries have diaspora commissions, and diaspora commissions are supposed to relate with the diaspora. But what you have is this system of bureaucracy where the same diaspora commissions that's supposed to reach to the individual people just relate with those on top at the missions and embassies and all that. And they don't really get to resolve issues or have town halls where they could come up with solutions and engage with the community that they are supposed to represent in the diaspora. So I think for us to move past that, the African Union as a body, inclusive body, overall body for the entire African continent, needs to recognize the 6th state of the African region, because now we have 5 regional blocks, including the diaspora, which is the 6th. Once the 6th region of the African Union, which is the diaspora, is recognized, I think we would not have much of an issue relating with individual countries, but relating with the African Union as a body. And once we relate with the African Union as a body, if a diaspora commission is established for this diaspora community of Africans, which is actually a huge potential for Africa, then I think we are close to actualizing. Policy would not be an issue. Development would not be an issue. I think the AU just needs to take the bold step and fully support the 6th region. So I think
okay. So there's a need to take some bold steps to rejuvenate this engagement with diaspora.
Exactly.
Ms. Nagwali, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah. Do you think African states have somehow missed the opportunity of fruitfully utilizing the skills, the resources, and the network of African diaspora for their own development?
Okay, well, let me starting that within the domain of social development, the diaspora members might contribute to the evaluation of knowledge standards and through the transfer of remittance and through social remittance as a way of doing, the migrant can send back within the original country. Such remittance may reflect innovation in process. For example, the way of producing the product or services or may signal changing attitude about the issues about social and economic development. Yet we have the problem that this diaspora's community have not much utilized enough. I believe that they have knowledge, skills, values, and resources that migrants have at their diaspora can make them to strategic contribution to the social economic development process in their country and across all the dimensions of development, but they have not much utilized enough. Despite the fact that the factor such as age, religion, economic prosperities, integration, and sense of belonging may determine the extent of which diaspora community may engage in a social development issues in general.
Yes. Dr. Daniel, what do you have to say? Because you are staying in US, you are a part of African diaspora. How do you see your engagement with your home country? Do you think there are enough opportunities for you to engage in a more productive way with your home country and contribute something which will, which will have a far-reaching impact on the development of your own country back in Africa?
Yeah, thank you, Narendra, for that question. And this is the $1 million question that every African leader should be facing right now. As you're aware, during this COVID time, every other advanced nation is running helter-skelter to look for solutions, right? Whether it is via the drugs or via the vaccine. The point is this: we want to end this crisis. We want to look for solutions. And that's what most advanced nations are doing. Surprisingly, some African countries are doing that. And the questions and the modality on them doing that are up for debate. However, the core thing is this, that the style of governance over the years have brought, and COVID has exposed that leaders have been disconnected emotionally, physically, policy-wise from the social developmental frameworks that they even swore to uphold. Don't forget, for every African leader, your primary responsibility as a leader or as a nation state is to see the pursuit of happiness, joy, development of your citizen, is to ensure as much as possible that your citizens have access and a better healthcare system, are better educated, are better secured. It is not your responsibility as a citizen to build mega hospitals. No, it is your responsibility as a citizen to ensure that you have leaders who are not corrupt, leaders who are visionary, leaders who see beyond when things are, leaders who can save for the green days. And this is where the diaspora comes in. The diaspora are those individuals who, for some reason, best known to them or because of their situation, have left their home country to seek for a better life. The common factor amongst all of us is a better life where human rights, education, better access to healthcare, and ability to send back prosperity is uplifted. So when we come to these foreign lands and see how organized they are, it touches a lot of us. You know, that most of what they do here are not something that we cannot replicate. Exactly. Maybe not to a big scale, but we can actually domesticate the principles of being good. It's universal. It has no religion or no ethnic bias. Being good, being a human being is universal, because the same blood and the same brain cells or neuron cells in the advanced nation is the same we have here. So the major thing is cognitive understanding of your situation. The major thing is mindset shift. The major thing is having a value as an African. Have we said this is the value of what it means to be an African? That I'll be outside my continent, but I must always ensure that the progress, upliftment, highlighting the positivities of an African in a foreign land will be my priority. So we must define those values, and those values must be hinged on proper governance, proper policy. Those values must be hinged on adaptation. Your culture all the time should not take precedence before human existence, human survival. You know, so many things now have to change because of COVID. If your cultural belief is to hug and you know, peck and then, you know, touch people, you know, that has to change. Whether you like it or not, it has to change. Because you don't see oxygen does not mean it doesn't exist. So people need to know that these things are real. If we must develop, our mindset have to change. We must define a new Africa. A new Africa will be the continent that all its natural resources will be used in a respectable way to ensure that prosperity is trickled down to everybody who is willing to be part of the process. And that means good governance. That means respect for human rights. That means telling the truth. That means ensuring we speak for those that cannot speak for themselves. That means including women in the demographic of governance. Every place a man can be, a woman should equally have that important role. Because the truth of the matter is this: we can't keep doing the same thing that has brought us here. If for 150 years have led war, men have done this, we need to bring everybody on board, including the women. That's the only way we can get out of this. So diaspora's role is very important, like Eze has said, but its major role is creating the content to drive all the socio-economic development that we so wish. Thank you.
So we need a altogether new perspective, a new vision to see that diaspora is contributing in a much more productive way in the development of their home countries. Izioge, if you remember, last year there was a campaign and an event organized by Ghana, which was called the Year of Return 2019, basically to commemorate 400 years of the slave trade, which started from Africa to Americas. And Ghana being the key transit point for, transportation of slaves. And the government of Ghana officially said that it has been a very powerful and very successful initiative by them to engage with their diaspora. And a lot of celebrities came, and a lot of branding around the event happened, a lot of PR work happened around the event. But if you can give us some insights, how productive, how useful that particular event was, and is there a way that there can be more such events by different African countries to invite their own people who are staying abroad to come and see what is happening in their home countries and contribute in their development? Do you think that's the right approach to go ahead with that?
Well, I think these things should happen in phases, just like Ghana has started with the year of return. Actually, then we were still actively with the Association of African Students. And we had, because we have this annual graduation ceremony where we organize in memory of the founder of the association here. So we also adopted the same thematic, just like Ghana has done for last year, 2019, the year of return. I think the African Union also has adopted that same thematic, and we felt compelled as African youth to also adopt the same. And what we did on the year of return was to use our own platform to throw light to the African students who are here and those who are residing here, African nationals, that once you're done with your study, you should bear in mind that you're here as a student, for instance, or you're here to seek greener pasture. And once you're done, the main thing that should always be at the back of your mind is, what contributions do you have for Africa? It doesn't necessarily mean year of return means being there in Africa, but what do you have? What impact are you working towards to contribute to the development of Africa? So I think that is one phase to this. Another phase would be the political will, and politics should not be one-sided actually at this time, because diaspora has a role to play. Diaspora is a community. Diaspora should be represented. So once diaspora is represented, then I think the diaspora will speak for itself. The diaspora would move itself. It would be more like a ripple effect, So I think that was just an inception towards the whole idea of diaspora contribution to the advancement of Africa. So I think a lot of things, a lot of innovative ideas would come in along the way on how we can be able to take the continent forward.
Yeah. Okay. So there could be a ripple effect if we continue with this kind of initiatives.
If I note also, it was very, very effective. It was very effective, and it's still been effective.
Okay. Ms. Siti Nagwali, coming to you. Can you hear me, Ms. Nagwali?
I can hear you.
Yes. See, today we are talking about both social development and economic rejuvenation of Africa.
Yes.
What do you think, how diaspora can help in ensuring gender justice and a better child rights system in Africa?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to start with the COVID-19 crisis vis-a-vis the social impact that has brought in African and in Tanzania in particular. The COVID-19 crisis has bring the risk of gender-based violence and violence against children, especially to women and children. And we all know that the disease outbreak affects children and men and women differently. These quarantine measures that has imposed as a reason to COVID, to fight against COVID, as a COVID measures are putting girls and women at a high risk of violence in home and cutting them off from the social and safeguarding essential services and protection. But again, the economic stress of the family due to COVID can put children, and in particular girls, in a greater risk of exploitation, child labor, and gender-based violence. And girls and young women facing severe shocks are more likely to take a high-risk work for their economic survival. Coming to the what a diaspora community can do to ensure justice. Okay, one, I think the diaspora community can be a part of the parcel of the team to raise awareness on the law with the aim of improving the implementation and enforcement of the law by providing the public with effective access to justice, increase the understanding and importance of the ensuring a proper justice. But also the diaspora community can promote equity through narrative. We need men to be part of the gender equities and conversation. We all know that most of these gender initiatives and session that has been done in various parts of the world, you can see that women, they are speaking about the women issues, but they're sitting alone to speak about women issues. But we need to bring men on the board to ensure that we change the narrative around all the value of women in workplaces and all other places in opportunity, and not only women, but for everyone. We all know that the gender-based violence and violence against children can not only affect women, but it can also jeopardize their productivity and can hinder us to obtain the sustainable development goal and the African we want in 2035. So the diaspora community have a great role to play to ensure that we have justice on board, to ensure that we all live in a safe and a welfare society.
Great. We hope that in the coming years there is more sustained relationship with the African diaspora, and they'll be able to contribute more in the social development of Africa, particularly on gender and children issues. So we really look forward to that. Dr. Daniel, you founded an organization called Team 54 Project, which is a youth-based organization, and you're based in United States. But do you also do some kind of work in Africa, in your home country? If you can elaborate more about the kind of work you are doing through Team 54 Project in your home country, it would be great for our viewers.
Yes, thank you, Narendra, and thank you, Siti, for again highlighting some of the important roles that we can play. Yes, so for Team 54 Project, Team 54 Project is a non-for-profit based organization that raises awareness on how we can address some of the climate change issue. Of course, many may not know, and those of us in the climate movement know that the COVID spread also has a link with the environment. Wildlife exploitation or poaching, wildlife indiscriminate destruction of natural resources have forced all these disease-carrying animals to come very close in proximity to where humans live, or very close in proximity to where they can be captured by humans and sold. And because most of all this coronavirus has been as a result of the spread of wild animals like cats, like bats, like camels, like currently now pangolin, and many other wild animals in the captive. The spillover is when this disease burden or disease in all these wild animals move into humans, and the human transmission have become more exposed as a result of us indiscriminately destroying where these wild animals stay, or not properly holding regulatory functions of both government and international community to people that exploit those things. So the key for us in Team 54 Project is to highlight that whatever happens in the environment affects me and you. And the earlier we start to respect this environment, the better. So our organization had been doing this pre-COVID, but now post-COVID, we now discovered that there has to be a different way we engage and help people return back to a bit of normalcy, if that is possible. And it requires us using agriculture. So for Team 54 Project, for this next 2 years, we're using permaculture. So permaculture is a smarter way of us having agricultural practice without using the monotonous, I want to plant only the corn and leave every other thing. I want to cut down all the trees and not think of what happens to replanting trees, or think of
sustainable agriculture is one of the areas where you have been contributing.
Exactly. So these are some of the things now we want to push as the way to get jobs back, as the way to help block those holes in the supply chain, as a way to inspire young people like me, Prince, and many other persons. Not only that, our organization is partnering with Africans in diaspora, especially with His High Excellency, the former African Union representative, who heads an organization called the African Diaspora Development Institute, ADDI. So ADDI is doing what we think we should support for social economic development. Create an interaction, identify where some challenges are, and then see how we can coordinate those in diaspora, just like Izzy said, those in the sixth block within the African context, to plow back or find days they can do free medical, find days they can come and supervise farming process, find days they can come and teach our young girls about STEM, computer, coding, how best to use digitalization to address some of the agenda related thing. But the key thing is this, that there has to be a way the individual first conceptualize the need to develop the society, while he now looks for other people, because the story has always been one person does one thing for the community. The community is large, but the key thing should be that one person in 100 times or 100 places, 100 people like that one person doing something that is more uniform, has more impact than 100% doing different things in different areas. So the key thing here is that that interaction must be coordinated. That interaction must take cognizance of culture, must take cognizance of peculiarity, and that interaction must have a language. The language should not be too technical. The language should be humane. The language should be driven with the local dialects that are there. The language should be driven with the human face. So Team 54 project is way committed to ensuring that we do this in Africa. We have about 54 African representatives or coordinators on ground, and they are giving us some feedbacks. We planted some trees already in the past. We hope to do more now. But permaculture is the principle of permaculture is the vision that we should do. It will help save energy, clean energy. It will help us use all waste on farm produce will be used to do other byproducts. It will help us give jobs back to people. It will help us create that independence from advanced nation. What we now need is the transfer of technology, as the UN have said, to those that are still developing. It is not, we don't want freebies any longer. I don't want freebies. I don't think Izugo wants free. All we want are...
I think that's a very strong point coming from Dr. Daniel, that we don't want freebies. We want to be skilled up. We want the technology. We want our own people to be, comfortable with this digitalization, and they should be, expert in that. So that brings me to the last, issue of today, which you want to discuss. Do you think the current generation, because Iziogo, you, Dr. Daniel, Miss Siti Nagwali, you all work with a lot of youngsters who are studying abroad, who have jobs abroad. Do you think the current generation of Africans who are young, they are more sensitive? They are more connected with their roots? Do you see a more positive, mindset in them for doing something for their home countries or home nations or home communities? Do you think the youth today has that kind of perspective, the African youth, that they want to contribute in a responsible way to their home countries? Do you find that spark in youth? Because you interact with youth on a daily basis.
Well,
very briefly, if you can share, then
so
we'll end the program.
There is always this African proverb where we're taught, and it's common, that there is no place like home, and wherever you go, you should not forget home. So I think a lot of them still do have that culture in them, that they want to take things home. But the challenge all this while has been that they do it in individual capacities. And when you do in individual capacity, the impact is very limited. So as I always say, the day you realize that you have been destined to be a perpetual eater of food and fetcher of water, that is to say, the day you realize that you are in some form not free, not independent, that is the day your fight for freedom and independence begin. So a lot of them have realized that despite the relationship that exists between Africa and the rest of the world, there seems to be a huge a lack of mutuality and respect in that relationship. And with that understanding alone, there is usually a factory reset that happens, because most times when we preach to them as our colleagues and friends to champion an ideology or champion something for a greater cause, they see it as something that is not beneficial to them on a personal perspective. But looking at the experiences, which is more collective, because the same way I think I'm treated as an African is the same way Madam City will be treated. So that treatment is just peculiar to our identity, and that is alone, I think, has been a force to bring in a self-realization or a collective realization to us all. So I think we are going back home. We are developing Africa because we've also realized, some of us, that the mantle or the responsibility of taking care of the world will become ours in the nearest days. And if we
I think
don't prepare,
that's a very big realization, you know,
if
if
we
youth
don't
wants to take
prepare,
up that responsibility of developing their own communities.
exactly.
Coming to you, Ms. Siti Nagwali, what you would like to say about the contribution of youth? Do you think youth are, you know, ready enough in Africa, who are part of diaspora, to contribute to their own home countries?
Okay, sure. Despite all the challenges that youth are facing, including not being appreciated for their contribution, but we have seen a lot of initiatives that has been made by youth, a lot of initiatives that youth are in a front line to ensure that they bring about a development in their own country. In fact, the youth in diaspora, they care about development. They feel the sense of moral obligation to those who are less privileged. And we have seen a lot of their contribution in different sectors of social and economic development back in their home countries. And as we can see that even one among these panelists from that one from Nigeria, also being a bit have made a big contribution to the country to ensure that we attain what is so-called the sustainable development. So they made a very great role to ensure that they can change in one way or another to the development of their nation. But we should know that the development is in a gradual process and not just a rapid process that we can attain at once.
Yes. Dr. Daniel, last words from you before we end our program today. How do you see African youth contributing to Africa's development in the next few years from now?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. And it also goes to tell you that from just the statistics of what you've done in this panel, you can see we're all speaking with one universal voice. That for the last 50 to 60 years of recorded time that I know, that young people have been shoved aside for a long time. Surprisingly, the last 10 years, young people have woken up, just like what Prince has said, there's a new reset button. Whether man, whether woman, whether young boy, whether young girl, people now know what should be a standard, and people know fully well where their current situation is, and people know where they ought to be. That conflicting image is what young people are saying, no, I cannot continue in this same situation. And they are voicing it out in their own little way. They are acting it out by sometimes going the extreme way. But the point still remains that they have energy within them to give their best. And it is left for government. It is left for them to determine where their future should lie. Our future now, as young people, should never be in your father and your mothers. It's not working. It is what has brought us here. For every young person listening to us today, that is an African, those games are over. It's time you take over governance. It's time you start to write your own ethical values. It's time at your local level, you start telling them, I've gone to university. This is what we must do at my local level. Those era of looking for a government job who did not plan for you, who will not plan for you, who cannot plan for you, are all over. The reality is this: there are no free food in Freetown. So it means we now need to make those hard-earned sacrifices. Not for me, for our children and our children's children. The point is this: Africans are very eager. We are very bitter. We are very angry. Yes, it's good to be angry, but the point is this: your problems will not go away. only when you take action. And that's why I want CT, Prince, I'm thanking them. They're inspiring young people. Let us work together and look for how we can get Africans on board their leadership, Africans on board how to develop their framework. Those teaching must learn new ways to teach. Those in engineering must learn new ways to cone down their technology to peculiar issues. Those of us who are leaders, in quote, should ensure that whatever we say or speak and dress and act and interact must always first project that African intelligence, African eagerness. You know, we must always go to those table of dialogue with a solution. We are done quarreling and fighting and going on strike. When they call you for dialogue, this is the alternative I have. I designed an app that can help people farm better. I designed an app that can locate extreme weather. I designed an app that can locate where women always have gender-related problems in my city. If we can be able to address this issue and cite police people in this city, maybe this, but you must go to those tables. You must seek election and have cogent antecedents to show for people.
Yes, I think so. So what Dr. Daniel is
more than ever before.
Yes, so Dr. Daniel, what you're saying is African youth is ready. African youth wants to, take strong actions to redefine their own future. Yes. And so that brings us to the end of this program. Dr. Daniel, Ms. Siti Nagwali, Mr. Izugo Namdi, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a wonderful discussion, and we hope to see you again in some of our next episodes. And I really look forward that African governments and African states would have a more systematic, more structured, and more strategic engagement with African diaspora, particularly the young people who are there in different parts of the world. So thanks once again for joining us today. And viewers will be back again with our next episode of Africa Talks on Tuesday at 8 o'clock India time. See you again.
Thank you for having us.
And goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Goodbye.
Okay, let's connect it again.